Hi, everybody. This is Bob Bird with me at the Department of Workforce Development. Thanks for joining us today. We have a very special program on unemployment insurance basics. We've had a tremendous response to today's program, and so I'm going to stall for just a second as we get a couple housekeeping items as we have folks continuing to log on. I do want to make a point of, on the upper right-hand side, you'll see an opportunity to send us questions. Not sure how much time. There's tons of questions we know that are out there. But you can send us your questions, those we don't get to today. We hope someone can get back to you, or you'll be able to find the answer to those that already exist online. So do send us your questions. Also, today's program is being recorded, so lots of information to share, lots of things to write down, but don't worry, if you miss something, you can also go back and review it. You'll be getting that link as early as tomorrow. You'll also be able to share that link with others. With that, we're very excited to have Josh Richardson. Josh is our chief of staff, and Josh also has an extensive background in unemployment insurance. Josh, thank you so much for being here. Why don't you take a second, welcome the crowd, a bit about CWD.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you all for joining us today. I know that you all found yourselves in a situation that you certainly weren't expecting a few weeks ago. We won't be able to answer all the questions or resolve all the challenges that you're facing, but hopeful that providing you with some information about unemployment insurance will at least help calm your nerves in that area. You'll know what you can expect, have a better idea of whether you're eligible. We'll take some questions that are common to what we have. The Department of Workforce Development is a state's agency. We really handle three things. One is we have workforce operations, so we do workforce development research. We do some training and programming system. We also oversee the Workforce Investment Act program, which is usually delivered through our Work One offices in your local area. We also have an office of work-based learning and apprenticeship that helps employers figure out how to help train employees on the job. And then what you're all here for today, we administer the state's unemployment insurance program. It's the bulk of what the employees have unemployment insurance.
And Josh, why don't we take just a second, because we've already started getting questions, and I know there's some specific instructions on the additional relief bill that's coming out of Congress. I know it's not set in stone yet, and so I think there's a couple of important parts we want to make to today's discussion.
Yeah, so it's still early on, and we may talk about parts of that as we get to slides later where it's completely relevant to. It does look like there are a couple of things being discussed. One is some additional compensation that would be added to the state weekly benefit account. That's not completely new. We did something similar during the Great Recession, but this one is a much more significant amount. They've also talked about doing some sort of what they're calling pandemic assistance or unemployment assistance. That one we'll really have to see the details on, but without trying to create too much hope here, one, because the bill hasn't passed, and two, we haven't seen the text. A lot of the media reports are indicating that that could include things like some relief for independent contractors, and so really, we have not seen the text that's in that legislation. The way this process normally will work is after they pass the bill and the president signs it, then the U.S. Department of Labor will have to interpret it and provide guidance to states about what our responsibilities are. I will tell you that is all happening at lightning speed right now. The U.S. Department of Labor has been a great partner at pushing that information out. Here's what I'd say about that to those of you that are on the phone. I know you're anxious. I know that you'd really like to know how that's going to impact you. Please don't call our call center with questions about that. Call center is really getting slammed right now with a bunch of calls from people with specific questions about their claim. We're going to do what we can, both to post that information on our website and on our social media feeds, and you will know the information just as soon as we are ready to start to implement it. So please, I know it's really difficult time to be patient, but do look for that. We will work as quickly as possible, and I do expect we'll have more information even in the coming day.
Okay, Josh, I want to point out a couple links that are on the site right now. One is unemployment.in.gov. The other one is the landing page, in.gov/DWD/19.htm. And those are really places to go to see the absolute latest. So there's no reason to make a phone call. There's some really, really good frequently asked questions in there that really hit to most of these areas. And I know just this morning, I mean, we work on and update these daily. So I know there's an impulse to get on the phone, jump in, call here, do this. But if you go there, a lot of it is there sitting right now, and we need to update that literally multiple times a day. So with that, I know we are going to jump in, talk about benefits, requirements, some of the amounts, and then most importantly, perhaps how to apply. So Josh, let's jump right in on some of the recent changes to the benefits.
And so when we talk about recent changes, there are some changes that I can talk about now, and that's because those, instead of coming from federal law, really come from the governor's executive order. Governor Holcomb has asked agencies to provide him with information about how we might be able to modify some of our rules to make unemployment insurance benefits more available to people that are out of work due to the coronavirus. And so a couple of the changes that are there, one is individuals who have restricted ability or availability for work under our general program. Those individuals can sometimes run into eligibility problems. Right now, those requirements have been greatly reduced and relaxed. And individuals, for example, who are under a self-quarantine, who are experiencing minor symptoms, or individuals who are required to care for a dependent until they can. Those individuals are all eligible for benefits now where they aren't under the typical law. We've also waived the work search requirements for individuals for the time being. That's one to continue to pay attention to. I know you're all anxious to get back to work and will as soon as possible, but if that, to the extent that the emergency ends, we will start to incorporate some of these rules back into our law again. For now, they are waived. Another thing that's there is we're extending deadlines for filing of claims, so we're allowing people to file older claims still in your benefit, get the claims filed as soon as you become unemployed, but we are taking late claims in the situations where something has prevented you from being able to do it on time. We're also working with our federal partners, and again, this is in relation to some of the legislation and news that we talked about earlier, to encourage them to make sure that we are looking at these individuals either who are independent contractors, self-employed, or may not have a sufficient employment history to qualify for benefits under the regular program. So those are things that we're doing now. And like I said, many changes I think in the coming days.
Josh, I want to do a quick timeout here. We're getting a bunch of questions coming in, and that's great. But to some degree, we can't answer specific case questions at this time. That's not what this is for, but to some degree, correct?
Well, obviously both, because the volume of people that are on the call probably aren't best served by dealing with individual issues. That's true. I know there's a need. Again, people are anxious to figure out whether they qualify or not. But dealing with individual specific cases are tough because there are a lot of factors that go into it. What I will tell you is the process has been carefully designed to try to pull all of the information you need to make those determinations of eligibility. We've worked hard to make that quick and efficient process as possible. We've worked hard on the frequently asked questions, trying to make sure, from our experience over the years, we know what kinds of questions people typically have and put those out there. So please go through all of those first. And then, like I said, ultimately, if you cannot get an answer and it's preventing you from being able to move forward, that is what the call center is there for. We just want to make sure that you check those boxes before you make that call due to the high claim volume.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the benefit amounts and how that's done. I know this kind of breaks things down, and I know it gives an example. Why don't you walk us through this?
So the way that we calculate unemployment benefits in Indiana is it's defined by state statute. So it's the state law that defines the amount of benefits we pay. I'll give you the general rule, and then we'll talk slightly more specifically. But the way that the program works is it replaces slightly less than half of your working wage. And so it's capped at $390 though. But so what we're really doing is we're looking at a whole 12 months of time, 4 quarters of wages. We take all of those wages and divide it by 52, which gives us your average weekly wage. And then we multiply that by 47%, and that should come up with your wage replacement there. Now, again, that's capped at $390. That's the maximum someone will receive. Again, if you've been watching the news, there's been some talk that they will have an add on the benefits, even quite significant here, make a pretty significant difference. And so keep up with that, and we will give you the information as soon as we get it, and we will also update you on how quickly we think we can implement that. I will say, just as a bit of a warning, it won't be immediate. It will require some computer reprogramming. We're working diligently already to prepare for some of those eventualities, but until we see exactly what the legislation provides and requires, because these are paid by the federal government, we're going to have to get their instructions before we're able to get them out the door.
Josh, I think about today's program, and it's our intention to perhaps go as long as top of the hour, if you're okay with that time. And we have lots and lots of questions. And again, we want to refer people to the FAQs that are online, and we have a lot that we've taken in already. So there will be plenty of discussion and questions. So let's talk about eligibility. That's another real important area, and I think some of the questions hit on that. So Let's walk through that.
Yeah, so again, I'll try to do the quick version, and then we'll dig in a little bit more. Here's what I will say is, if your employer has reduced your hours to 0, if they have reduced a portion of their staff or all of their staff, or if they've closed temporarily due to the coronavirus, you are most likely going to cover the separation eligibility part of what we do. And so, that hopefully provides some calm to some of the folks that are out there on the phone. Now, there are really 3 parts of eligibility. One is what we call monetary eligibility, and that's to make sure that an individual who files has been working, has a connection to the workforce. There's some real technical rules about that, and if you're really interested, you can go to our claimant handbook. It's on the website at unemployment.in.gov, and you can look and it'll tell you very specifically how we do that. I will say, as a general rule, if you've been working pretty solidly for the last 12 to 18 months, you will fall into that monetarily eligible category. And so that one is a hurdle that's pretty easy to cross so long as you've been working solidly for the last 12 to 18 months. The next is, why are you out of work? So again, in normal times, what we're really trying to ask there is, did you get fired for a good reason, or did you quit for a bad reason? Those are issues that we have to adjudicate each day. But if your employer has simply reduced hours or staff, or they have closed temporarily, almost always in those cases, the individual will be eligible based on separation. And then on a weekly basis, we're going to ask questions about whether you actually did in fact work, if you did work, whether you earned any income, or whether you had any sick pay, whether you had any vacation pay or leave pay from your employer in that week. And we're also going to, as I mentioned earlier, try to see whether you're able, available, and actively seeking work. But those rules have been greatly relaxed and expanded to cover most individuals in most situations that would be related to the
Josh, I had a few questions that have just popped up about the last bullet here. Employees must stay in contact with the employer. They close their doors, phones are not answering. Help me.
Yeah, so the best way to think about this is that we just want to make sure that as we hopefully quickly roll through this, but certainly looking to the day where we're on the other side of this and businesses are opening back up, at that point in time, we're going to want you to be responsive to your employer's calls back to work. Reports from employers that they've reached out to you, been unresponsive, or they've invited you back to work and you haven't shown up to work, those could jeopardize your claim. At this point in time, we just want to make sure that this doesn't mean that you've got to do anything specifically on a weekly basis other than be available to that employer once this sort of freeze is over.
Let's talk about, let's do a little deeper on eligibility. And I know this slide goes into some very much detail.
Yeah, so we can talk about this a little bit. One of the main things to take off of this slide is, first I'll say that one thing that's been overwhelming for the department here is the number of employers that have reached out and asked us, how do we speed up the process for our employees? They've been concerned about how to best ensure that their workforce is covered during this time by benefits. But I've seen references, mostly in social media, to posts that say things like, my employer has denied my unemployment benefits, or I saw one that said something about, my employer has put us all on a 0-hour shift. And that makes us ineligible for unemployment benefits. Here's the way that there are 2 things that I would point out about that. In our terms, a person is totally unemployed when they work no hours and they receive no income for services performed during a given week. And so if that's the situation that you're in, you likely meet our test, you should file a claim for benefits. Employers play an important role in our system. They provide us information that helps us determine eligibility. But it is our determination, not theirs, that will control in this case. I would also encourage people not to get too far ahead of, relying on friends and neighbors who tell them eligibility answers. This is really something that's best left to the department. It's a complicated system with a lot of different things going on. So file your claim. We'll ask you, a number of questions that are relevant to us. Read them carefully, answer them honestly, and we'll make the determination about your eligibility as soon as possible.
Okay, now let's, how to apply. This is very, very important. So, okay, I'm in a situation now. When can I apply? But let's talk about the application process, starting with being online.
So Indiana is actually one of the first states to move to an online filing system, and one of the first states to do that almost as the exclusive way to file for benefits. And so we've set up a site, unemployment.gov. I've referenced that a couple times already, and that really is to be sort of the one-stop resource for you for questions about filing a claim. So included are the frequently asked questions that I've already mentioned. There is a link there to file in our uplink, our claimant self-service system, claim for benefits. There is no requirement that you go to a local office to file a claim for benefits. There hasn't been for years. It's not necessary. You can do this from home. We hope you'll do it from home. You can use a smartphone. You can use a tablet. The website has been optimized for your use of both of those. We've actually made some significant improvements lately that require a lot less text entry through the process. It's mostly yes or no questions once you enter your demographic information. And so that is the place to go to file. Again, we've been surprised by the number of times we've had, well, how do we file if the offices are closed questions, because there has not been a requirement to visit the offices in Indiana for a number of years.
And I think it's probably important to note here, when they go to the site, unemployment.in.gov, they first should do a few things, right? Get together with the handbook, the guidebook, learn some stuff there, frequently asked questions, and then I think the next slide coming up will tell them there's an FAQ in there that tells them what they need to have before they apply, right?
Yeah, and let me, yes, and I'll get into that. I should revise one thing I said earlier. There's no requirement to go to a local office to apply for benefits. We have had in Indiana for a few years a requirement that after about 4 or so weeks on benefits, individuals would receive a letter calling the office. That would be required to maintain their benefits. That program has also been made. So now, at least temporarily, there's not a requirement to go to a local office either to apply or as part of that the claiming process. But yeah, so when they go to unemployment.in.gov, I would absolutely recommend that they read both of these FAQ sections that we put together. I think in total it's about 3 pages worth of questions, and I think they'll save themselves a lot of difficulty by doing that. Then again, the handbook is much more substantial. It really is, tries to be a complete guide to all the answers to questions about eligibility for unemployment benefits. And so if they want to dig deeper, that's there as well. And like I said, I think by the time they get through both of those, they'll eliminate any need to call our contact center. Certainly if they do and they've exhausted those options, that's available to them. So yeah, let's talk about what's needed for filing a claim now. So this is a pretty comprehensive list, and you may find that you actually need slightly less, but what you will need is a valid email account. As we move to this online system for security reasons and basically to better communicate with you, we're going to require that valid email account. Some limited personal information, your Indiana driver's license or state issued ID card is necessary because we are going to ask for some information off of that. That really works as to be a fraud deterrent. A number of states have been susceptible to fraudulent claims for benefits. We've been able to cut down on that here with this simple information. Your social security number is sort of the key to what we do here. It helps match you with the wages that employers have paid and the taxes they've contributed to our system. So that's helpful. To the extent that the employer that you are most recently separated with has been a short-time employer, you may need some specific information about them. Employers are required to report to us on a quarterly basis, and so to the extent we have that information, we will provide it to you. But if it's been a more recent employer, they may be missing there. And then besides that, we'll just want to know a little bit about your employment history, and you will know most of that off the top of your head. Last piece, the bank routing number. If you would like your benefits to be paid by direct deposit, you will need that information. We have options in Indiana. You can receive your benefits on a debit card, a prepaid debit card, or you can receive those benefits via direct deposit. In order to do that, you would need your account and routing.
And Josh, I do think the trend has been towards direct deposit, correct?
Without a doubt, it is a quicker way to receive the benefits because essentially the system itself will kick off both payments at the same time. But that first payment, you've got to wait for the card to be ordered and mailed, and then you've got to receive it in the mail before you can use it. With the direct deposit, it's electronic and it would happen instantaneously.
Okay, so quick review, look at those items, make special note of it, have those things together before you go online. To apply.
I think that would be the best advice, yes.
Okay, so now I have filed. Now what can I expect?
Yeah, so first of all, let me talk just a little bit about that filing. I think there was a question that we saw either yesterday or maybe prior to today's call about when to file. Really, it's a good idea to open that claim or file that claim once you've finished your sort of last working hour there. So we had a question about, hey, I think this Friday is going to be my last day. Wait until after Friday to open the claim. We don't anticipate anything to change in the next week, but we have situations where a person expects to be off and it never actually happened. And so the system is set up to really look at look at you once that week is ended. Now, once you file that claim, you would do that during that first week that you're off. Each week, you're going to need to return this as a voucher. So our weeks run from Sunday through Saturday. And so we're going to ask you questions that are relevant to the work week from Sunday through Saturday. After the week is over, we're going to want you to confirm some of those answers. So each week you'll get in and you'll ask, it's a much simpler process than that initial filing, but we're going to ask, did you work this week? You'd have the opportunity to report any hours that you did work. We'll ask the income that you received for those hours worked. And of course, you can say, no, I didn't work. And then it won't ask you any questions about your hours. It'll ask you a few more simple questions as part of that process. And that is a weekly process to ensure that you remain eligible for benefits. That's where that initial filing process can take anywhere from probably 20 to 40 minutes. This process usually takes 5 to 10 minutes.
And just because you may have picked up a few hours during that time period doesn't mean that negates the possibility of earning benefits.
Right.
It just would change the amount.
Right. So there is the ability in Indiana to receive partial benefits. And so once we calculate your weekly benefit amount, if you have earnings that are less than that weekly benefit amount, you need to report them to us. And we would adjust your benefit amount accordingly. But essentially, you're going to be eligible for the difference between what you earned in your weekly benefit amount. So taking that few hours that are needed and appropriate for you to work or to clean up things or to finish things off won't stop your eligibility for benefits.
So one of the questions that came in, I completed my last day at work last Friday. I will get paid for the next 2 weeks. Do I have to wait till that time to apply? The answer is correct.
This is a common misconception, and it happens in a couple of areas. So one is we're looking at in the week were you unemployed. So we'll get people that maybe their employer operates on a delayed payment schedule where they work their last week on Friday, but they won't actually receive the pay for that for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. You're still unemployed in the week in which you don't work. So we're going to ask you questions about your earnings during that week. The other way this comes up is sometimes when people work those partial hours or they return to work, they think they get to continue to claim until their first paycheck comes in. And that's also not the case. So read the questions carefully because it is going to ask, did you work this week? And it'll tell you which week it's talking about. And your answers all need to pertain to that week. So if you work, obviously the answer is yes, even if you haven't been paid yet or received that.
Okay, Josh, we're going to jump into 2 or 3 frequently asked questions that are posted online. And we'll go through those, and then I want to jump up to an employer page and landing page where we're going to do some more questions and see what the rest of the time allows. I also want to make a plug for social media tags because that's a great way to stay up on the latest information. So let's take a look at this first question. It talks about being in a quarantine basis as a director, you're a medical professional over there. What do people need to kind of know about this here?
Yeah, so this is an area that probably under our regular law would have been a closer call, but again, due to Governor Holcomb's executive order, we're able to cover individuals in this situation if they have been either by a medical provider or an agreement with their employer placed into some sort of a medical quarantine that will not prevent their eligibility for benefits in this case. Now, if they are receiving sick pay for that time when they're out of work, they'll need to report that, and that could impact their benefits. Again, it won't prevent them from ever being able to collect, but certainly you're not going to be able to receive both sick pay and unemployment benefits for the same period of time. But absolutely, they should file. They should read the questions carefully, answer them honestly. As part of our process, we've added some questions at the end of the filing. So don't try to trick these questions. Answer them as they're written. And then there will be the opportunity at the end to answer some questions that are directly related back to the coronavirus. And that will help us make sure that we get the decision right and that it's in accordance with both state law and the executive order that we're operating.
Okay, next question. I know this is the common one out there. I am home with kids. School's out. I am home with kids. The daycare is closed. Am I eligible for benefits? I know there's not a blanket answer for this, but there's a general answer, right?
Yeah, so it's pretty close to a blanket answer. Under our normal law, again, to the extent that an individual tells us that there's something that keeps them from working, then a lot of times they become ineligible for benefits. And one of those would be, I've got to care for a dependent child and I cannot find other daycare for them. That could make them ineligible for benefits. Again, under the executive order, we know that a lot of people are in this situation. Schools have closed, daycares have closed, and for this Hoosiers and for their children and to try to stop this spread. the coronavirus, I think that this all makes sense to pull this together, and the executive order allows us to consider individuals eligible in these weeks in which they're caring for a child prevents them from working.
Okay, the next question. I know a lot of people in the hospitality industry, the restaurant industry. There's a question here about tips and benefits for those folks in that industry. We're seeing more and more of this. What are the important things to know here?
So this one is a tough one. So it's only in the sense that the process could be a little longer for them. So when they file their claim for benefits, one of the first notifications that they're going to get from us, and it's essentially all done by the computer, is a listing of their wages during the relevant period. We call it the base period. And so they'll see a listing of employers that paid them wages over that time frame. I would say for everyone, it's important to study that form and to see whether you have any employment that's missing. But I think especially in the restaurant industry, it's important to look at that. Make sure that your wages are there, because all of those wages will help to ensure that you're receiving the maximum benefit amount that you're entitled to. Missing wages would result in lower benefit amounts and potentially make you ineligible for benefits if those low wages end up not qualifying you to be monetarily eligible. Now, here's what will happen when you get that form. If something seems to be missing or off, there are instructions on there about how you can provide information to the department. That's usually things like tax returns, something that would show us information to verify your earnings, and we can potentially add those to the claim, impacting your eligibility.
Okay, let's do another one. Kaylee, if you can move on, talking about reduced hours. My hours are reduced, so I'm still working, but I'm still employed. Can I apply? Can I blend the two?
And that goes back to a little bit what we talked about earlier. So there is the potential to be eligible for partial benefits, but the way that that works, and this is another area where some of the specifics matter, but generally speaking, what we're going to do is we're going to benefits by the amount of income you earn. So to the extent that your earnings exceed your weekly benefit amount, you may not be eligible. Now, again, and we've had this theme and we've talked about this before, that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to come into the system and file that weekly voucher. What you're going to need to do is when it asks, did you work, to answer that question with a yes, to enter your gross wages, not your take-home wages, and then we can make that determination. We may decide that you're ineligible for that week, but as long as you report honestly, the system can work that way. Your hours drop back down or be eliminated, your claim would stay open, and then you could report accurately at that time, and we would go back to your regular benefit.
Okay, Josh, I'm going to take some of these that have come in. The first one up, will employees be required to use vacation or sick day in order to cash in or get involved?
So required is the key word there. This is really something to work out with your employer. To the extent that you take sick pay or vacation pay, it is deductible for benefits. Obviously, your vacation or sick pay may end up more for that week than what your benefits would be, and so it's perfectly appropriate to take it. That's something that you need to work out with your employer. There is nothing under the state law that is going to require you to take that to exhaust that vacation pay before you're eligible. Now, the area where this gets to be a little bit more tough recently is that as part of some of these federal packages that they put out, there are some requirements to employers to provide some sick pay. And I think we're going to be dealing with cleaning up some of that as it comes out. We will try to provide further guidance. But so we will ask you specifically, are you receiving vacation pay? There's a list there where you just click the boxes of the types of pay you received. You need to tell us about that, but you are not required to take it first.
Okay. You speak a lot of folks self-employed. There was a couple questions about disaster insurance for the self-employed. What do the folks with self-employed need to know? And I know this could be changing in the next few days, but what do they need to know, those that are self-employed?
Yeah, and this is one of these things that I think over the last few years, as we've moved more to the gig economy, has sort of just haven't kept up under federal law. And so the way that works is that generally individuals are only eligible for unemployment if they were considered an employee, meaning that they were not an independent contractor. And if they were self-employed, it means that they paid themselves as an employee and reported that to us and paid taxes on it. What they need to know is that Congress is working on this. Again, we talked about this a little bit in the beginning. What traditionally is called disaster unemployment assistance. There's this around, I think, pandemic unemployment assistance. And there are some indications that they intend to work to cover self-employed independent contractors and maybe even those who don't have the sufficient work history to qualify. But that's one that I referenced earlier, is that we really don't have the details to. So while I think there's reason to be optimistic that's not a done deal yet, and they just are going to want to pay attention and file as soon as possible.
Okay. Part-time, I work part-time. I have 2 jobs. One of those have been eliminated, so I'm now working a part-time job. What do I need to do?
So, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. If you're working 2 part-time jobs, in order to be eligible, a person needs to be looking for full-time work. But again, the requirements for work search are waived at this point in time. It would go back to very much a similar answer as to the question about if my hours are reduced. So if you're working 2 jobs, one of them has been at least temporarily eliminated. So file a claim for benefits based on that separation, but we will be asking you each week, did you work? How much did you earn? It doesn't matter which employee that's for. If you have earnings and you worked, you do need to report that to us.
Okay. What if I had an open claim from last year? So I had set up an account, I had an open claim, now I'm back.
Right.
What do I need to know?
So the system should really help and walk them through that process. So the way that it works is once a person opens a claim, we set up a benefit year, which is again the 52-week period out into the future, and a lot of our rules apply to that year. Should they become reemployed within that year, what they do in our world, they file an additional claim for benefit. And so they would get in to the system. The system should guide them through that, walk them through that. They're going to need to provide information about their separation from their most recent employer. That may be a case where we're going to have to ask you information about your employer. It may not be in our system yet, but they should be able to continue their eligibility on that initial claim. They'll want to pay attention to when that benefit year ends, because at that point in time, they'll need to file a new claim in our system. But again, we've improved our system so it walks you through that process and it shouldn't catch you by surprise.
Okay. There's a question here, Josh, about someone that's a server in the restaurant industry. They went online, they applied, they were denied. Others at that same place doing the same job were approved. So I imagine it was based on some of the information that was in there. Should I reapply, or can I even reapply?
Yeah, so when you say reapply, the better thing for people to do is to appeal the determination. So if you've been denied, if you've truly been denied, that means that you have gotten a determination from us that says you are ineligible, and it will state the reasons for that. In those forms, there are instructions about how the person can file the appeal to that determination. So it's not a reapply situation. It's an appeal situation where they'll have the opportunity to provide us information about that. To the extent that that's occurred after one of these coronavirus-related shutdowns, it may very well be a case where their earnings didn't meet what we talked about earlier, the monetary eligibility requirement. And so I would especially encourage that person to go find that monetary determination. It will be in your documents on your homepage, and look at that to see, are all my wages here? Employers sometimes miss that. There sometimes is a misreporting where they've reported it under the wrong social security number, and so it doesn't match up. But those records should match your records for what your pay was during that time.
Okay, there's a question here. I know we addressed this. I think this was just added this morning on the FAQ. I made an entry problem. I made a mistake when I did my first application. As a result, it was denied because of a mistake I made. There now I think is an email address where you can send in anything that might be wrong in your application.
Yeah, so they're going to want to look through the site on that. There are a couple of different ways we handle that. And, in our normal times, again, our first piece of advice would be called the call center. We don't, for security reasons and to try to prevent fraud, we don't like for people to be able to sort of try over and over and over again to figure out, what the right answers are supposed to be in order to generate a claim. We want them to answer those honestly, but people do make mistakes sometimes in data entry. And so one option would by appeal depending on what that issue is. But the better way, to the extent that it's just a sort of a typographical error or a simple error, there are a couple of things that may happen. One is through our adjudication process, to the extent that it's an obvious error, you sort of click the wrong type of separation, and you've mentioned that, we may catch that on our end without any action on your side. There's an email address they can provide that to, and I would encourage them to go to the frequently asked questions to find that rather than reading that off here. Or if it's a situation where you've actually reached that determination of eligibility, at that point they may need to appeal. My hope is that as we figure out how to sort of control the volume better for our call center, that will be an appropriate place to go. But right now, you may be better off with it.
Okay. A few more questions on the appeals process. We've mentioned appeals a few times. Do you know about how long that takes? I know It sounds like a long, drawn-out process, but it actually moves much quicker than people might realize.
So we've worked really hard on that, and obviously that's subject to change as the volume from claims comes in. Again, the situation that we're in is different than other times in the past, and even slightly different than the Great Recession, and that the vast majority of people who are out of work are going to be eligible. We don't have the same number of employers protesting. They understand you're eligible. And again, we've heard from many that want to make sure that they're doing what they can to process these claims to help us process these claims as soon as possible. But if you find yourself in that situation where you need to appeal, well, it's subject to change. Generally, those appeals are scheduled within 6 weeks of the time you appeal it. I know that sounds like a long way out. These are also very informal things. And so hardly anyone has legal representation at these hearings. It's the judge's job to try to figure out if you're eligible. 6 weeks would be what I would ask you to wait for to the extent that you find that appeal necessary. But again, most people won't need to use that process. And we're going to try to resolve these issues before they get to that appeal state.
Okay, just a reminder, we've had several requests for today's information we're putting up on the screen. You will be getting all this along with the recording of the program. Josh, I know we have people on from all around, from all corners of the state, a couple of them that are kind of related to geography. I live in Ohio, but I work in Indiana. Where do I apply?
So what we would tell people is that if you should apply for benefits in the state where you worked. And the reason for that is this: the employers, they're going to be controlled by their state law. Their state law is going to require that they report to that state, that they pay their unemployment tax in that state. And so you should report, or you should file for benefits in the state you work. Now, I can't speak for Ohio's system. I've never seen the way that their unemployment system works, but if it's the other way around, you're out of state, you're filing in Indiana, we actually ask a question really early on about what state you worked in or what other states you worked in. We allow you to add wages from other states. We have an agreement with all other 49 states and a couple of the territories that participate in the unemployment insurance program, where if you tell us you worked in Ohio or Illinois or Florida or wherever it was that you worked, we can reach out to the state, quickly pull your wages into the claim, and that can impact your benefit amount as well. So make sure that you don't overlook that question. I think sometimes people overthink that and think that if they had wages in another state, that's going to cause a problem. The truth is, by pulling in those wages from the other state, you can actually increase your benefit amount and make sure that you're receiving the maximum amount that you're eligible for.
Okay. And if you could just emphasize again, I know you did mention it about work search. Work search, I know we have driven that home. Normally a customary fee, but that's getting waived. Right?
So I mean, a couple of things. So under our normal rules, individuals who are job attached, meaning that they are expected to go back to the employer that they've temporarily been separated from, those individuals are waived from the work search requirements, even under the traditional law. We know that you've got an employer to go back to. In the other situation, the one where you've been separated from an employer and you're sure you're not going back, generally speaking, you've got to actively seek work in each week. We started by relaxing that rule, and now it's essentially waived. I would say that it's a good idea, if you don't have work that you're going back to be doing the kinds of things you need to do to get ready to work as soon as possible, updating a resume, potentially social media profiles related to work, and sort of taking some of those steps. But as of right now, we will not be denying people for failure to complete a work search until the emergency orders are lifted or until we learn otherwise.
Okay. Can you speak a second to the vouchers? Will vouchers be sent to me? How do vouchers work? They term, everything's electronic, right?
Again, we're all online now. So what will happen is each week we're going to push out a new voucher. Again, just take a look at that. We've tried to make this process as easy as possible, but it is based on a really complicated statutes that have a lot of different elements. But when you log into the system, it's going to show you the vouchers that are out there and eligible for you to file. There will be times it will list the dates for the weeks that you're filing. Sometimes you'll see a voucher and you'll know, I was still working full time then. That's fine. Click on the voucher, it'll ask if you file for that week, and you can simply say no, and it'll move you on to the next one. I would advise doing those in chronological order. Start with the oldest one and move forward from there. But those vouchers will pop up electronically each week when you're eligible. So for most of you, you will see those vouchers for the first time on Sunday after that week in which you file your claim, and each Sunday thereafter until you return to work.
Okay. Talk about deposits again. I know there's that key bank is part of that answer. And this Sunday through Saturday is the reporting period. once they're up and running, when does that deposit hit, and how will they see that?
So typically, and again, I always advise people to wait until they see that money hit their bank account. But typically what's happening is if you file that voucher on Sunday, so long as there is no issue that is raised by your voucher, right? So you don't answer any questions. And again, most of those are so relaxed right now that this is unlikely to happen. But if you report maybe some income to us, it may take another day or so. But we'll go back to the typical cases. If you file out on a Sunday, we'll generate that payment by Monday.
Okay, I got a couple related questions here about assisting someone else that may have challenges going online and applying. Can I apply on someone else's tablet or computer, or can I assist my sister who is somewhat challenged, who is now unemployed? Can people help each other, particularly those that may or may not be able to get online?
So I guess I'll start with sort of the obligatory, make sure that we're practicing our social distancing. I know that we're going to have some individuals who may not have access to high-speed internet or to an ideal technology to file this, but absolutely you can use someone else's computer or tablet. You'll obviously want to make sure that you're logged in under your own username and your own account. You don't get that crossed up. You want to make sure that you're answering questions about yourself and your own unemployment situation. Absolutely, you can help someone else. You need to make sure that they understand we include, again, because we do have a small number of people who try to fraudulently receive benefits. There are a number of things, and there are a number of things that you'll have to attest to. And so I would go through what sometimes will seem like a painful process of reading through some of those things if you're providing assistance. There's no prohibition on providing assistance to someone else. Just know that people will be held responsible for the answer, for reading the questions carefully and answering them honestly.
And Josh, this next question, I know how you answer it. It's kind of close to home. Dental assistant. So our services have been rendered non-essential. I'm a dental assistant. And the answer to that question is always very simple, right?
Yes, well, so first of all, and I always try to be careful to point this out, when people say, can I apply? The answer to that is going to be yes for everybody. Everybody is eligible to file a claim for benefits. The responsibility on you is to read the questions carefully, answer them honestly. I can't say that enough. But again, yeah, to the extent that you're temporarily off of work and you're a dental assistant, or you're working at an optometrist's office, or you're working anywhere where they've shut down and said, hey, we didn't want to do this, we like you, we've got a good relationship, we plan on you coming back, we don't know when that is. If you're working no hours and receiving no compensation for services that you provided in that week, that's sort of the classic case of who's eligible for unemployment assistance. Now, again, you're going to have to meet those other tests. You're going to have to be monetarily eligible. You're going to have to answer the questions each week so that we can make sure you continue to be eligible. But absolutely, that would fall within a group of people that can potentially be eligible.
Okay, and what about questions on the border? I don't have an Indiana driver's license. I've actually been working for years. I have a North Carolina driver's license. What do I do?
No problem. So I think that the way that question is actually phrased, and it's been a while since I've looked at it, is the first thing that it's going to ask you is if you have a valid Indiana driver's license. And then once you answer that question, it's going to work differently. We use that to run a cross match. We try to make sure that the information that people provide is accurate, but it's not a problem that you've got an out-of-state license. The problem would be is if somehow what you're telling us doesn't match what we know from the Bureau of Motor Vehicles.
The question about pay stubs. It says that it tells you to fax or mail pay stubs to cover with a cover sheet. So what's the deal with pay stubs?
Yeah, so that one, I don't know exactly what context that's in. A lot of times with this deductible income issues, we want to be able to calculate those exactly, follow those instructions. There are some cases where you're going to need to fax or email us information just so that we can verify it. Those numbers get to be important, and we don't want to end up with payment. I haven't seen those, but I'm sure that it's in regard to that question. Make sure that you're just reading those and working through it, and I'll go and do the double check on my end, and it may be reason for follow-up here to make sure that we've got the appropriate ways to pull those in from people that don't have a fax machine.
Okay, I'm going to group these into the single question. School bus driver that is now off work because school's being closed. Somebody that's been out on maternity leave who now is coming back to the job, but the job's not there.
Yeah, so the school bus drivers certainly, again, eligible to apply. There is, in the case of school workers, we have a second issue that we look at. They're treated slightly differently than others in that there are rules around ineligibility during periods between academic years. We're obviously not in that situation right now. you were all out of work due to the coronavirus. And so shouldn't be a problem with your claim. As long as we've got that information in there, you should be all right. It's during a time where you would normally be not. Maternity leave question, probably slightly harder, but the extent, so again, when generally under our normal rules, if someone is too sick to be able to work, then they're ineligible for benefits. Those are relaxed, and to the extent that your maternity leave has ended and you are ready to return to work, then your eligibility would resume normally. And so again, that's another situation where you're going to need to read that question. You're going to answer it honestly. Don't try to trick the question, but if it asks if you're available for work, and you are, other than the coronavirus, and you'll be able to answer questions.
Okay, this next question, I know this has come up a time or two. So someone has work available for them, their employer has work, they've got no directive from a physician.
So this one's a little bit harder, and I think has changed somewhat even since we put these frequently asked questions, and it's probably worth taking another look at. So early on, when we weren't under the stay-at-home order, there was this real difficult question of certainly if under the agreement of your employer, you were home on quarantine, you were covered. There was this other situation where you weren't sick, no medical professional had told you were sick. Your employer said, hey, I still really need you here. That was a little bit tougher of a call. I would say now, under the governor's order, this is still going to be somewhat on a case-by-case basis. We're still going to ask questions about why it was that you felt compelled to quit. But this would be where individuals would report to us and say, here are the circumstances. I talked with my employer. We tried to come up with a solution, and they said, no, I stay here and I quit. That will just have to work through that adjudication process. And that, unfortunately, is one that may take us a little bit of time to work through the investigation because the specific facts are going to be relevant for us.
Kaylee, if you could move up a couple questions. We've had a few questions come in on RISIA. First of all, Josh, can you explain kind of what RISIA is?
Yeah.
And then here's, again, you can see the question here where they did receive a letter to attend an in-person thing. And I think a lot of these things have changed.
These have changed. So first, this RISIA is a program that we operate with, again, under the direction of the federal government. And what this is after you've received unemployment benefits for usually 4 weeks in our case, we go ahead and we send you a letter and we ask you to report in person to a local work one office where you can receive an orientation services, sometimes some career counseling, and sometimes go through some assessments to help you have a speedy return to work. This obviously required that people make trips into our local offices. Very early on, we suspended this. We wanted to understand they do not need to come in and congregate in a large group in a local office. And now, obviously, that's become even more important. Right now, no one will be denied for failing to participate in one of these reemployment services and eligibility assessments. I will tell you that we are working to schedule these to do some of this work virtually. We still think that we can use this time to help people better prepare to return to work. But until you get a letter directing you to participate in services, you can be confident you do not have to show up at a local office to do these until we tell you otherwise and the emergency situation is over. So if you have a letter that requires you for the weeks of March 16 or March 23, you don't have to come in this week, and there would be no one there to take you if you did.
Okay, and there is, I think, one more RISIA question. I think you kind of covered this for the most part. There is nothing really planned coming up on this, right?
Yeah, so again, we're working on it. You can see here that we're working to implement virtual services. I'll be honest with you, that's become a slightly lower priority as we look. We're going to deal with high volumes and working on implementing federal legislation. But this does remain critically important to our mission, making sure that we're doing all that we can to help people make a speedy return to work that is suitable for them. And so we will work and pull this back up, and you will be notified by us if you're required to do anything your eligibility. And I will tell you that you should no longer be receiving those letters. And if you had one that was mailed out before we stopped, then you can disregard it.
Okay, we've got a slide up here for our employers, Josh. I know we have several employers on the line today. And what do you want them to take away from this slide?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things for employers to know. One is that benefit charges that are directly related to coronavirus, so individuals that have been laid off because you've been ordered to reduce your operations, will not be charged to your specific employer account. And so those charges won't come back to you. They will be mutualized instead. But the other part about this is that you had some about, or my rate's going to jump up immediately. The answer is at the end of 2020, we do merit rating for 2021. And so your merit rates could change in 2021, but again, they'll be slightly shielded by the fact that we're not directly going to charge the accounts of employers whose layoffs are due to the coronavirus. So the only big exception to that is that employers who pay us, who are what we call reimbursable employers, which means that they just pay us for the claims as opposed to paying the tax, those individuals, those employers are ineligible or because they haven't contributed to the pool that pays the claim.
Okay, and since we are talking about employers, there is a question that came in. Can employers supplement beyond the 390 maximum? So I'm receiving the 390 maximum. My employer, out of generosity, wants to contribute more to me. Yeah. Is that possible?
So this is a tricky one, and it's one to work through. I'll tell you that it's our approach that we don't want to get in the way of the employer's generosity. And so there are ways they can do this. We do want to be careful. One of the best ways to do that is to pay the amount as a bonus. I can only speak from the unemployment insurance side. You know, they're likely still to treat those as wages for the purpose of tax side of things. But on the benefit side, bonuses are not deducted from unemployment benefits. We're simply saying, hey, we're going to temporarily increase your wages, could be. And so that is probably something that if an employer wants to do that, we certainly appreciate get in the way of that, but we want to make sure that we know what's going on. Typically, I'll just take a second to say the system is working a little differently right now. Normally, it's employers that sort of are the check on the payments that we make. They're the ones reaching out to us and say, hey, something doesn't look right. I actually did pay this person in a given week. Right now, it's employers saying, how do we help? I know not all employers can do this. I know that employers themselves are worried about how they're going to keep their business going, and in some cases, how they're going to continue to support their families. The ability to do this, we don't want to get in the way of it, and so we've worked with a number of employers to accommodate these situations.
Okay, Josh, as we wind down, we got a few things we want to share here before we conclude today. The first is just kind of a snapshot of the new landing page we've created. You can see information on there. This is obviously taken a few days ago. It talks about these upcoming webinars. So as we do more information like this, we mentioned the new relief package. This is one of the first places you'll want to go to find it. Recordings are going to be on here. Additional pieces of new FAQs can be found here, as well as the unemployment.in.gov page. So just take a look at this. This is one of those you want to bookmark because we'll be adding to this pretty regularly. And again, the FAQs are there, and I know we update those almost daily, correct?
That's right, and we spend almost each day reviewing those FAQs and trying to figure out what changed. Things are moving incredibly quickly for us, but we are going to try to keep you updated as best we possibly can.
And then another next slide here is some online resources. Each one is, and I think I would start with Indiana Career Ready, because the ones that fall underneath it can all be found at Indiana Career Ready. And so on there, you'll find Indiana Career Connect. There are a lot of people hiring right now, including the state of Indiana. So you can find positions at Indiana Career Connect. You can set up an account with Indiana Career Explorer. In-demand jobs has a lot of really good data, lots of really good current data on top jobs right now. Hoosiers by the numbers is a fluid site that talks about claims. We're looking at this week, right?
Absolutely, that's one where I think as people have been really interested in the number of claims being filed each week, and that's where we place all of our data that talks about unemployment rates, claims volumes, and it's just a wealth of other information about the economy.
And again, the governor's very successful next level jobs initiative. You can find all that under Indiana Career Ready. So do take some time and explore there. And also, I just want to let folks know that we're actually going to be doing virtual job fairs, and you'll be able to, if you check the landing page, you'll be able to find out more about what jobs those are, where they're located. Take a look at the social media side. We talked about staying in touch. One of the very first places we post up as soon as we get it is on our social media accounts, and there's how you can stay in touch with us. So that way you don't have to go back to the landing page to see what you might have missed. You can have it coming right into your inbox. So check out our social media accounts, and again, that's the first place that we often post things. So Josh, we have kind of reached the top of the hour. Some takeaways from you on what's going on, and any reminders. I know we're applying online. Get your things together first, and be on the lookout for some possible changes before the week's even.
Right. Other than that, just know that we're working as hard as we can. We understand that none of you expected to be here. We certainly weren't expecting to be here a couple of weeks ago either, but it is, we're where we're at, and we want to work as hard as we can to provide the benefits as soon as possible to people who need them. So we'll keep working on that.
Well, Josh Richardson, thanks for your time today. This has been a great discussion, and thanks for your leadership in the unemployment insurance area, you and the team here at DWD. So with that, we're going to conclude today's program. Just a reminder, you will be getting a link tomorrow with all of today's content, and we do encourage you to stay in touch with our many resources that are online for the latest breaking news. So with that, we are going to conclude. Thanks for joining.